I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. We are coming to you live from a snowy New York City. Andrew Quo, how are you dealing with this winter wonderland?
Yo, I was talking a big game. I had a tweet in my drafts about how we don't need boots anymore in New York, and we've evolved to be the middle of the old New York and LA. But goddamn, this snow, man.
You were suggesting that we were going to adapt beyond the need for Timberlands, but it was not true.
Did you see those Pharrell Timberlands with the LV print on the back of the tongue? So if you wear them like hip hop style, you can see the brand.
He gets it, this guy.
Yeah. How do you wear your Timbs? As a New Yorker, everyone has their own style in which they wear their Timberland boots. How do you do them?
I felt like when I was younger, you kind of liked the tongue out so you could really see the Timbs. Now it's a little more reserved. I'll kind of go, over but draped.
I like that. Yeah. I used to do tongue out, kind of like laced halfway so they could slip on and off. Man, times have changed. These kids, like lacing them up all the way.
No, that's crazy.
Oh, kids are doing it, man.
Like lace all the way up is wild. Like they aren't really supposed to be tied.
They're not. Yeah, they're not meant to. As Pharrell points out, they're not meant to be tied all the way. But he's thrown a lot of ideas into the wind, like driving a Cybertruck and posing next to it. Looks like a very small man.
I was about to say, I didn't know the scale of the Cybertruck because I've seen Pharrell. I've stood next to him, and he is a petite gent. He's a little elven.
Hey, but could he be a 1A? Is he a 1A?
He might be too short to accompany Brunson in the backcourt. I mean,
right.
But next to the Cybertruck, I guess I didn't know that the Cybertruck was like power forward sized.
Right. I mean, he has, as someone who loves to wear triple extra large clothing, he has a penchant for scaling himself. Because remember that huge cowboy hat he used to wear?
Oh, of course. That was his trademark for like a year.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny, right? Like, it's a shame that it's a Cybertruck and just not like a giant Volkswagen Beetle. A custom.
Yeah, that's strange because, as I know with you, like a lot of times, it's hard to tell how enormous you are because, you'll go to the bar and you'll sidle up and you'll break out your thimble, excuse me. And you're like, Ivan, pour me a cold one. And so like when you see a photo of you holding your frosty thimble.
That's right.
You can't really tell that you are so enormous.
It's true. It's like when I read a book, I don't carry around The Joy of Basketball. A tiny, tiny book. The Cliff's Notes of The Joy of Basketball. Soon, I have a galley, but soon to be available everywhere.
I like when you are, it looks like you're, to the casual observer, it looks like you're reading some literature, and I know you. I know you don't read. And the reality is that you are just inspecting a matchbook.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it was a Bazooka Joe comic. Do people know what those are anymore? God damn, I've been watching too much YouTube. But yeah, I mean, sometimes even, we're talking transportation here, big ass cars. I don't like to be in an SUV. It makes me feel bad. Sometimes the subways are just like, what I really need from my house to Clandestino is a tunnel.
So that really was a dominant topic of conversation last week. Would be the so-called Jew tunnel that was populated by, quote, tunnel Jews.
That sounds so harsh, but that's okay to say.
Well, yes, and I'm using those because those were the hashtags that like veered wildly into anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I don't love it. I call them the Shabbat tunnels.
Yeah, no, I think that's more appropriate. That's why I was saying with quotes. But
That's right.
But yeah, I was hanging out with a group of people over the weekend, and everyone was just talking about that. That was all people wanted to discuss, and it was called in this conversation the Jew tunnels, except for the fact that like 4 maybe or more of the people in this group were Jewish, so they were sort of able to say the J tunnels, and I was careful. I didn't want to say the Jew tunnels. I was like the tunnels. And so
That's
forth.
like me with the C bomb. Don't even think about it. Yeah. So what was the tenor of this conversation?
Well, I don't think we need to totally explain to everyone about the J tunnels because it was
Still
such a big
confusing,
story.
though. Yeah.
But just to briefly recap, I guess this has been going on for a little while, and maybe the police knew about it, and they told the people at one of the liturgical buildings in Brooklyn that they needed to stop digging tunnels under their structures. And apparently, the short version of the long story was that one of the religious leaders wanted to make their like temple or synagogue larger, and that's literally all it was. They were just digging tunnels in order to make a larger space.
Because that was
And
his
then-
decree before he passed away.
Exactly, and that's really all there was to it. You could go on to all the minutia of who these people are and what it represented and why they were doing it and where it was going. But ultimately, it was like the religious leader wanted a larger synagogue, and they're like, "All right, boom, we
Bros,
got
make this
some
shit
trowels
bigger. Yeah.
on it."
That would be such.
And-
That's just strange, like deathbed request. Yo, if I was dying on my bed, and Nick's draped in Nick's sheets with Nick's everything around it, I'd be like, make MSG bigger, more lavo meatballs as far as the eye can see. It's like, God damn it! All right, let's make this shit bigger.
Okay. I know you're in dire condition here in hospice, but is there anything else? Okay. Let me think about this. Yeah. Make servos bigger. Come on, dude. Everything is expansion.
Do you have anything to say to your friends, your family, your followers? It's like, Hell Square number 6. Expand the brand of Hell Square.
Okay. Yes. I do have something to say to my loved ones. I'm going to need you to make scars bigger.
But the shock of this story, well, first of all, to your point, getting the facts was like, it took time, but there were people who were just like, yo, listen, I did 45 minutes of reporting. Here's exactly what it is. But beforehand, it was driving me crazy because you had morons like Gavin on Twitter just being like, here's what it is. During COVID, they wouldn't let them go pray. So they built these tunnels so they could skirt the law. I'm like, wait, doesn't it say 6 months of, we're off a few years, aren't we? And people were just like throwing these just like logical explanations around. But it is just something even more random. It's someone like, make this shit bigger. Add a bat on to this beautiful building.
I mean, it was distinctly New York,
Yeah.
which was very entertaining.
Yeah.
And some of the internet content was very funny. Someone was talking about, like, look, I've been out here trying to explain anti-Semitism to people, and now you've got, Hasidim crawling out of secret tunnels.
a terrible optic, to be honest. Like not perfect for the brand, but a random image. But morons is really took with
I
it.
mean, the video of the guy
Oh my
coming
God.
through the hole in the grate and racing off. It's really, really, really amazing footage, as you said.
Yeah, it's just like, listen, Homer Simpson is not a moron than him, like drilling through the ceiling, like whoops, and going back up, like a cartoonish, strange optic. When I first saw this, I was just like, well, we've seen plenty of, like Bonzi Wells goes in and out of manhole covers, Carmelo Anthony, Jason Terry. This is like, we're a fan of the NBA. We're used to this visual. So when I saw it, I was like, whatever. And then I read about it. I'm like, tunnel? Yo, and it only took them 6 months. Like, imagine what other shit they have down there that we don't know about. Do they have a Fat Beats down there? We're talking about underground culture here.
Did they have a club with a Sunday night called Mecca where Funkmaster Flex DJs?
That's right. I mean, some of my favorite Jewish delis have come and gone, like Carnegie Deli. I know they're making pastrami down there, man. Yo, there is a Carnegie Deli. You just have to find
My
it.
final wish, expand Frankel's.
Shout out to Frankel's. But yeah, like my studio is in this neighborhood, and every year there's a holiday where I think the tradition is they build an outdoor structure to honor something in their beliefs.
Yeah, go on. Tell me more about it.
Well, it's crazy. Because I'll be walking down.
Just tell me about the belief system. Like, what's the significance of the outdoor shelter?
I'm guessing, and I'm a damn tourist of this shit. I'm guessing it has something to do with like covering and like humility and kind of, I'm guessing here. Like shelter is a big motif, right? And so these outdoor sculptures, they are basically, but these outdoor enclosures
Keep going. Yeah, this is good. This is really informative.
are fucking everywhere. So even on Broadway, it's just like jetting out. Basically, it just leaves you like a little bit of sidewalk. Are these like plywood structures, and they have like many people in them. And I always wondered why this was allowed. And I'm like, oh, when you live and are around this community, they just do whatever they want. They paint, we've talked about this, they paint over bike lanes, they build structures, they kind of just do stuff because they have an immense amount of power in our local government.
So my understanding of these shelters, and I believe their pronunciation, it's like sukkah,
Oh my gosh.
whatever.
Do not ask, all right, do not pronounce it right, for God's sake.
Something like that, sukkah,
That's,
something along those lines. But it's. I mean, I'm looking it up, but I also remember this is true though. Is that it's about the time in the wilderness,
okay.
like when the Israelites were wandering. So that's the idea. It's like that you're outside, and it's a celebratory thing with these structures. Yes. But it is tied to shelter, but it's literally to symbolize when they were wandering after being liberated from Egypt.
I mean, some of these things are pretty cool. Some of these things are not cool. Not all of these shukas are created equal.
So the point you made after that, I would say that is a takeaway that most people are not going to understand if they are not somewhat familiar with New York and this community, is that the Hasidim generally operate outside the bounds of like regular society in many ways. Mm-hmm. Like whether that's with their school district, whether it's
real estate practices,
painting over bike lanes. They, as you said, generally just do what they feel like.
Well, when COVID happened, they were like, we're going to do what? We're not going to quarantine. We don't believe in this.
And they didn't. They just did what they wanted.
Yeah.
And they're like the only group who will like get in shoving matches with police officers. And there will be like very little ramifications.
Yes. Respect. It's like the BMM.
And the reason that this occurs is that they generally vote as a block.
Yes.
So if no politician wants to alienate them, because you then would lose that entire population, because they're so like tightly, so tightly bound culturally that they listen to their leaders, and their leader says, "Hey, we're going to vote for this candidate." Then they all do.
They're highly motivated to When they have to be motivated, they will show up and vote. And
this creates a ability for them to more or less flout the law because no politician wants to lose the support of this group and have it go entirely over to a rival. So whether it was Bloomberg, and I mean every politician,
every single, you have to
account for it.
Yes. So, like, there was no punishment for this tunnel. They were just trying to fill it with concrete, which is crazy. That's a lot of concrete. And then there was protests, and like morons got into the discussion as they do, right? Because this feeds right into, yo, there's a part of the internet that's obsessed with underground shit. And I'm not talking like Mos Def. We'll get to that later, but like tunnels and like secret societies underground, and obviously Pizzagate, which doesn't, the restaurant doesn't even have a basement. But this really keyed into like the dark corners of social media, where people like, we told you that powerful communities have underground tunnels. Where is that a mattress? Is that a bloodstained mattress? I'm like, here we go. Like, this is uncontrollable at this point.
You're like, one, that's poop stained.
I know that. Is that Paul Pierce's like luxury underground loft? Because that has an area where the poo comes out.
But the point you're getting to about the tunnels is interesting. I think there was a somewhat viral tweet about like, why can't I stop my husband from digging this tunnel? And like,
tunnels
the
are
only thing that
fucking
seems
cool,
to make
man.
him happy. He just goes to the backyard and starts digging this tunnel. I'm worried it's going to collapse on him. Like, what do I do? He's just out there laboring away, building this
Fucking
tunnel
cool.
to nowhere.
Yeah.
And kind of similarly, there was a woman who was like, well, if you got $3 million, like, wouldn't you use that on a bunker? I'm like, well, bunkers are kind of tunnels. There's something similar here.
Yep.
And you've got, you know,
Jeff
the world's
Bezos.
most wealthy men
Yeah.
are building bunkers in New Zealand, wherever. And this idea of a bunker really is an extension. It's like the luxury tunnel.
Remember when there was a rumor that J.D. Salinger used to have a tunnel from his house to his car to avoid the media? I'm like, what the fuck? I don't think it's true, but I don't know. That was a famous tunnel. Also, the tunnel, talk about it, shout out to Eric Adams, the Tunnel Club on the west side was a big deal.
But the bunker thing is kind of interesting because there are people who have enormous amounts of wealth and decide, yeah, I'm going to build like a bunker that's going to help me survive a nuclear apocalypse. And then you even have this woman saying, well, if you had $3 million, would you use that on a bunker? And I was kind of doing the math. I'm like, okay, so I'm going to drive from my apartment in North Brooklyn in my 15-year-old car.
Cookies whipped.
Yeah, drive up, you know, to like Red Hook, Kingston area maybe, or maybe towards, you know, Livingston Manor, Roscoe, where I've invested all the money I have. There's $3 million that has been gifted to me into a bunker, a windowless chamber beneath the ground where I can feast like Steve 1989 on shelf-stable delicacies. Why would
Compliments
anybody
to the chef
use...
Boyardee. Yeah.
Why would if you gave $3 million to anyone, why would they use that on a bunker? That's a really crazy position.
I don't know. Bunkers are fucking cool though, man. Like, oh, $3 million is not enough.
I'm talking the priorities. Like, okay, you've got your regular income, and all of a sudden, $3 million lands in your lap, and you're going to use it on a bunker.
Yeah. Well,
What?
yeah, $3 million is not enough, especially in New York City. But let's say it was $30 million. Pfft, I'm making that fucking bunker, dude. You better
Right,
believe
that's
it.
what I mean. Like $3 million, like, ooh, that could be a 2-bedroom in Manhattan. That could be a really nice place upstate. You know, by a lake. You could have
No, man.
nice
You gotta
view.
get that. You don't have that underground DNA, man. You have not spent enough time with the DJ crew, the executioners. Like, there's something like, I love a basement. Yo, a rec basement, do not even start with me, man. Like a finished basement with carpet, a Papa Shot, and like HBO. Dude, my fantasy. Maybe a beanbag? But my fascination with underground chill out tents is like, I think, like one of the few deeply stupid masculine things I have, which I'm like, tunnels are cool. Tunnels are rad. No one has to see you. You could probably put a Super Nintendo down here and play Street Fighter without any distractions.
I remember my cousins lived in a rural area. We'd visit them, and they built a little tunnel.
Yeah.
They would dig because they had land, and I thought that was very cool.
Yeah.
So maybe there is something instinctual.
Is it tied to stealth wealth? Because when you build up, you can kind of see what that kind of outward statement is, right? It's wealth, it's up, it's high, it's a throne, whatever, penthouse sky, high in the sky. But when you build down, that's what the rich people do, and you don't have to flaunt it. It's just like, oh, these rags, they're worth more than your paycheck.
Have you seen these videos that have millions and millions of views? And I'm not sure exactly what country they're shot in. I would say like Laos, or like those that vicinity. Like it could be Vietnam, it could be Cambodia. They're in that vicinity of the world, and
The food capital of the world. Yeah.
they're generally showing like one person or two person building these structures, like in the jungle, so to speak, where it's like they're cutting bamboo and they're stitching together, and they all have these like elaborate like tunnels and basements and like building and digging this foundation, and then they fill some of it with water, and like it's a pool, and they're making these structures, and clearly there's a lot of people working on them, but they only show the two people using, very like, it's usually like primitive something. That's like the word they use a lot of times, like primitive tools, and they're just using like little hand tools and little things. But it's, again, the appeal of these videos seems to be the subterranean digging.
I know. To that point, and a little bit of subterranean digging. Have you heard about the Kowloon walled city in Hong Kong that they tore down? It was like a slum that was alive, that they kept on building on top of building on top of building, and it was kind of like this. I just watched some bullshit about it, but it's like this neighborhood basically with its own zip code that kept on growing and changing without any kind of government or city regulation. And they tore it down eventually, but it's been the setting for many like film projects out there, and it's like, I don't know, this mythological place that was alive, to my point, to the point you were talking about. It's like they kept on building in every direction and on top of each other, and I thought it was like they had come up with their own government, their own rules, their own infrastructure. It's kind of interesting. One of the last places on Earth that had that, now it's gone.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Kowloon City.
And on its deathbed, it said, "Expand in every direction."
Make this shit bigger.
But yeah, I wonder if there is something instinctual in like the male reptilian brain that's like, if you can build a place underground, you'll be safe. It's going to be invisible. No one will see it, and you'll be surrounded. You'll be like, you won't be cold. You can shield yourself from the elements. It's going to collapse on you and kill you.
NBA Jam arcade machine would go. This is where the popcorn machine. Oh, this is a little fridge full of Jolt Cola. Did you see the viral video of that woman who was building an underground? I guess it was kind of. It wasn't a tunnel, but she was engineer. She was going to YouTube, asking engineers on Reddit what to do, and like building out like a really structurally sound bunker. And then, of course, as soon as it went viral, they shut her down. But it wasn't a man, which was surprising.
I've seen YouTube videos that are people building surreptitious tunnels beneath like their like a house. It's like, yeah, I wanted to build this. They don't go anywhere. Right. They're like, yeah, I got electricity running through here. It's as you said, structurally sound. It's carpeted and all these things. Like, what's it for? Oh, nothing at all. There's no point whatsoever.
There was that one guy who made a swimming pool illegally and then turned it into a golfing practice zone where they put the screen down just for a day. So the city inspectors was like, all right, you can do this, and then filled it up with water right after, and then posted it on the internet.
Yeah, I remember this. Yeah,
I mean that's some dirty water.
We talked a lot about underground.
I know. I tried to do this transition.
I know, but I'm coming back to it. So yes, underground rapper Mos Def, called out your guy Drake and said that he was making pop music.
That you could shop to. Music to shop to.
Music to shop to. How offended were you, scale of 1 to 10?
I was offended he didn't go harder, so 5. Come on, man.
fair.
Like, that's like being like, yo, Taylor Swift, that music sounds like it's for teenagers. I'm like, yeah, it is. And those teenagers get older, and what it's like Drake. Ugh, this is pop music. Like, I don't know what to tell you, but it sure is pop music.
Kind of a strange comparison, though, because as has been discussed, they're really sort of similar. Not exactly in what they talk about, of course, but stylistically.
Yo, you know
both
Drake is
can-
a fan of Mos Def.
Of course he was. Like, both can rap, both can sing, and a record like My Omi Says, like Drake wouldn't make that record because he wouldn't have that vocabulary or those connotations. But it doesn't sound unlike, say, a Drake record, in that it's a like mellow production, an R&B song for all purposes, or soul, or however you wanted to describe it.
Yep.
It's just that the content is different, and maybe the production is different, where most wants to use samples, and Drake will use more keyboards or electronic beats, or however you want to term it. But like, they are fairly similar for as far as artists go, despite being on, I guess, different sides of this ideological chasm.
I mean, different sides is kind of a good pun for Black on Both Sides, his most famous record. But it's funny because they're kind of similar in more than just musical ways, because both were child actors. I mean, Mos Def was in a movie with Jack Black, Be Kind, Rewind. Like, he wanted to be a pop star, a popular artist, And Drake has not acted, I think, since Degrassi, because his music is extremely successful, and his career at Kentucky University as a baller, just like, the Knicks are going to draft him at this point. But like, I think the fury that Mos Def kind of like stirred up on the internet was, we're not sure where his anger was coming from. It almost read as disappointment or a kind of bitterness.
Yeah, I mean, with him, it's funny because his biggest song ever is like a record about girls too.
Yeah, I mean,
Miss Fat Booty, which is a great record, like
Yeah.
fantastic record. It isn't that different from a Drake record in concept. I mean, it's a sped up soul sample that Ayatollah did. It's great production, but like, Drake has used samples like that,
yeah,
like the Lauryn Hill sped up sample.
Yeah.
That like, it's the same vibe.
yeah.
But you know what? Mos Def is interesting to me because, like, I always liked him, thought he was good, listened to his music, even though I wasn't really into Black Star because I'm not a Talib guy. But I thought
He
Mos
had
was,
moments
like,
though.
I thought Mos was great. I've
Yeah.
always thought he was a great rapper. Today, I feel like he was even better than that. He really kind of was one of the best rappers of all time. Or he was fantastic. He just didn't make music. I think he's in the same category as like an Andre Benjamin. He just doesn't have the catalog to back that up.
Yeah, I mean, and also we value that kind of skill differently now. I think 20 years ago, being the greatest rapper, like you would talk about Black Thought from The Roots. But we've kind of, thanks to Drake, have segued away from that. And I feel like that evolution is frustrating to someone like Mos Def, not only in its like distilled artistic form, but like Drake represents some kind of marketing professionality, right? Like, he is someone who has seen Mos Def's career and was like, this is how I refine it. This is how I become bigger. This is how I make it mine. And I think for somebody who's still as young as Mos Def and still has many things to make, looking at that and knowing that is frustrating, because, and that's why you accuse someone of selling out. This is a very Gen X thing.
It's kind of what you said though before, is that it's undoubtable that Drake was a Mos Def fan. And when Drake was first starting out, and a relative nobody, he was really into like the band or the group, Little Brother, and definitely was into like Dilla and Mos Def is very much part of that
1,000%.
sound and that time. Like I'm sure Drake listened to Common. Like this was stuff that he was into, and you see those influences in his early music. And it's also, when he was around New York, he was hanging at like Santos with Vashti. Like he was. This was the people he was around. So I guess if you're Most and Drake comes out and you're watching his development, you kind of know where he came from and you hear these traces. And then when he becomes a huge pop star, and he doesn't talk about race or class or talk about issues that were part of that circuit, like the discussion topics and religion. I mean, you look at what Most talks about. He is quote unquote like a conscious rapper. That was what these guys were termed, and Drake would be the exact opposite. That he doesn't talk about anything controversial. He doesn't talk about anything that's important. It's just all, generally speaking, about girls and money and clout. And those are things that are part of rap forever. But if you know his origins, like Mos Def definitely does, you are probably looking at this and saying, well, yeah, he's making music that is for shopping. It's for pop charts. This isn't where he came from. And when we knew he had an appreciation and like enjoyment for what we did.
Yeah, and I want to kind of cape for Drake a little bit here, because with all those descriptions of his music you said are true, but also I thought the limit of what Mos Def was trying to do, and he's like a true artist. He had a burnout that wasn't dissimilar from like Dave Chappelle, right? Like he kind of was overwhelmed and receded into himself a little bit. Drake never did that, but I think Drake's music is bigger than the discussion of like money and wealth, because like it's a tip of the cap to Nirvana or whatever emo stuff was, right? Like on Take Care, my favorite record, it's like deeply personal, and if that's authentic or not to you, that's another discussion. But I felt like his songs that are about extravagance have a tinge of like, guys, I've told you I am like not necessarily happy. I am the GOAT. I have confidence, but also like I kind of fucked up a lot. And I really love his music for that reason. Obviously, his catalog is so big. He kind of touches on so many things. He can shapeshift better than many other artists. And I think Mos Def had trouble shapeshifting.
I agree with that. I mean, look, I think Drake has like an insane catalog of hit records. And I also think he is, let me phrase it like this. I don't know what's in Drake's heart, and ultimately it doesn't matter, right?
An artist doesn't know what they do. Yeah, we figure it out after.
If he's making records that have, as you said, like this tinge with this sense of loss or aching and longing, of course he does. And I don't know if it's real or not, and it doesn't matter. But you are right. I also think that like Drake is a pretty cagey artist, and my main objection is not whether those emotions are true or not, because again, how can we tell? And it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Is that I always get annoyed by like specifically the ones where he's like talking about like the good girls gone bad and all this stuff. I'm like, oh my God. That stuff always just bugs me. I'm like,
you're
come
a good
on,
girl
Drake.
And you know it.
Yeah, all that stuff. Like, I thought you were a good girl and now you're out at the club. Like there's these like such things like weird judgmental things that go into his stuff, and it's like, yeah, but you're making party music and now you're here like complaining that girls are at the club. Like, come on, man. Like,
I would rather be friends with
what's genuine
Mos Def.
here?
Yeah. I would rather have a beer with Mos Def than Drake, for sure, if we're doing that. But the interesting thing, as we're 15 or 10 minutes into this discussion, is how the hell are we comparing Mos Def to Drake? Right? Like, that's as if you take a really wonderful singer, people like Julian Baker. It's like, well, Julian Baker or Taylor Swift? It's like, well, we can't really do that. It's like, well, Taylor Swift just sings to people who aren't really into songwriting, and you can hear her song at Walmart, but not Julian Baker. And Like how this reminds me of like the Kobe versus LeBron thing. It just by creating this discussion, you've kind of elevated the artist punching up, and you've kind of put the burden of proof on the GOAT. And like people are like, Drake is petty enough where he's going to react to this, but he doesn't have to. He's goated. Like this dude has been successful for almost 15 years with chart topping songs. Like we're talking the Beatles here, not Mos Def. But since Mos Def fans are louder than Drake fans, this discussion kind of legitimizes his career.
Right. I get that. It's like Jason Tatum or Norman Powell. One gotta go.
Yeah, right. Yeah, this happens in basketball more than music. It's like the way the BMM has elevated Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum just by comparing them to actually great players, like god tier players.
But also, yes, I agree with this. It's also that we just love lists. We love pitting artists against each other.
Love them. I love it.
Is Mos Def not allowed to have opinions?
No, but
right?
we are allowed to
mean,
be
if,
like, nah, you know?
I'm saying he understands how this works. If he says something about Drake, then it's going to go viral and people compare the two. Like that's just how this operates. But also, like if someone just asks Mos Def, like, what do you think about Drake? I mean, is he supposed to say, I love Drake, he makes awesome music? If he's like, no, I think he makes pop music, which is different from what I make or what other artists that I listen to like. I mean, I don't know. It's like the perils of being notable at any level lend itself to this exact paradigm.
Well, this is the Don Draper quote. It's like, this is what the money's for. Like, as Drake is sitting on top of the world in his castle, it's just like, I'm so annoyed that this artist I love is taking shots at me. It's like, well, this is what the money's for. And Mos Def, I'm sure, is like, I would switch places with him in a second.
And Mos Def also may be like, look, I'm not here just trying to take shots at him. Someone just asked me a question.
Right. Like what we always talk about is none of these lists should be similar. No one should agree on any of this shit because they're not quantifiable ideas we're talking about. So ranking them is fun because it's a window into the person who's ranking them, not into the participants of that list.
By the way, this was just sprung from a conversation I had the other day. Was LL Cool J the first rap star ever?
You're out in you're out in Hell Square number 5 talking about LL Cool J at the hometown
I can't
bar.
remember how he came up. It might have been as like that he was an actor or still around, and I was like, wait,
Deep Blue Sea.
He might have been the first actual rap star.
Oh, does he predate? Like Star? So we're not talking about like Sugar Hill Gang or anything.
Yeah, the only other option that, because I was texting my buddy Jason Johnson, he was like, I think Curtis Blow could have an argument. I was like, wow, that's really taking it back, but that could be true. It might be Curtis Blow. Other than that, I think it's LL. It's one of the two.
Respect to LL Cool J, who was like hilariously wink wink corny in his late ages, but he was incredible and influential. You might be right because he kind of crossed over into being like a model, a fashion dude, and then eventually acting. He was face forward in a way that Curtis Blow couldn't really fuck with.
And I was looking it up and I forgot the year, but like the song Radio came out in 1985. That's
Insane.
So long ago.
Really insane.
Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it is the classic rock of our generation. It's like the old dudes talking about Steely Dan. It's LL Cool J now. And
the odd thing is, maybe you can come up. Sorry to cut you off there. Just because I want you to lead into this a bit, is that like that music from like 1985 or Curtis Blow doesn't even get played in like the old school hip hop set and hasn't for like 20 years. It's so old. So in that way of like we're talking about like classic rock, is it like Elvis? Like what would it even be? Because the old school rap set, you're gonna hear like Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah.
That's from 10 years later.
Yeah.
Let alone Curtis Blow or some shit.
Dude, that that sports analyst L. Duncan on ESPN tweeted something over the weekend being like, yo, I remember one time I was DJing a party and all the girls were dancing and some dude comes up and requests Illmatic. Just like, what the fuck? Are we not on the same planet here? But this discussion is hilarious, right? Because it's like, I mean, it's like tunnels. It's a deeply male discussion. You know, it's like these ranks and I feel like with these, I love it, the Ego Trip magazine forever, but this way of talking about rap music or any music there's a lack of joy to it a little bit. And I kind of wanted Mos Def to talk or think about that, because going after Drake is fine, whatever, to your point. But like, there's a joy that I think people experience with his music that conscious rappers kind of grasped, but it was elusive for them. It wasn't necessarily party music, but Drake turns into kind of like a party guy. And I think there is a kind of resentment there.
Yeah, I was just thinking about your point. So I was like, hey, Andrew, you're DJing this party that's in the Servo's expansion. Can you play a little like old school rap? And you're like, cool, here's some Treacherous 3.
No. I mean, I always tell this story at the Rusted Knot, our homies. I was DJing, and he was just like, you know, I think like what would really work right now, the owner of the place was having a great time. It's like, you need to drop some Young Jeezy. I'm like, that's what's playing right now. He's like, no, not this song, the other song. And I'm like, you mean right afterwards? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, this is what we're into. He's making a list in his head, and he's giving me his rankings, which is fun and everything. But I think that was the last time I DJ'd there. Picklebacks.
Okay. Oh, you want like classic rap? Okay, sure. Here's like some Kid Creole, and like,
Right.
with the Furious Five.
You know what would get all these interesting people dancing even harder? Slick Rick, the master of storytelling. This night needs some stories.
Kind of true. Children's stories still gets it going.
Slick Rick is fucking amazing. The first grime rapper of all time. He's awesome. I have no problems with him. Musical.
Have you noticed, and this kind of ties in with DJs, I'll get into that part in a second. Have you noticed the term like glazing popping up a lot? In,
Dude,
it's like it's very Instagram. It's Instagram more than Twitter, but it always seems to involve basketball. It's like the glazing is crazy.
I was going to say, because you know I'm a donut fiend. So, like, that one is not my favorite, but in a pinch, a Glaze regular is fine. Wait, this sounds kind of dirty, though. We're not talking breakfast anymore.
I mean, it's basically dick riding, but I don't know if the glazing, but the connotation, it's definitely sexual. It's definitely calling someone a meat rider.
It is super harsh, and it takes like a normal basketball conversation to the next level. It's like, I love LeBron James. I think he's better than Michael Jordan. It's like, you're just a LeBron Glazer. I'm like, whoa, this went crazy a little bit.
Yeah, all the examples seem to be, like, I just looked it up, and they're all so based on basketball, right? Like the one they're giving an example here is like, yeah. About LeBron, the glazing is insane, and that's from like a year ago. And then like Jalen Green has the nicest hair in the NBA. Like, you glazing hard right now, and that's from like the end of 2022. So this is not a term that's that new, but it just seems to keep gaining popularity in like Instagram basketball world.
And we just got through talking about fucking LL Cool J and Mos Def. And this is a kind of a battle rap thing, right? And I think basketball definitely has ties to more of that than any other major sport. And this is basically calling your opponent homosexual, which is like a really old, antiquated way of like putting someone down. And Eminem, for example, right? Like got famous off that. So when people debate basketball stuff online, and we'll get to this later, is some of the dumbest people I read on my feed. it goes to that because not only is it a way of emasculating your debate opponent, but it's also like a wink to like, I'm real hip hop.
Yeah, I mean, glazing feels to me that it was like a New York teenage phrase, and it definitely comes from like ejaculation.
Thank you for making that clear. I thought you were talking about donuts still, man. Dilla,
Andrew,
rest in peace.
Andrew, it's not donuts.
It's like Draymond Green getting ejaculated from so many games that he has to take a mental break.
Yeah, he was ejaculated for throwing a punch.
It's like when coaches argue calls on the behalf of their players just to have a performative ejaculation.
Dude, you're glazing hard right now.
Bro, you're glazing a little too hard.
You know who the loser is in this?
Aside from me, who?
Longtime New York City reggae DJ Max Glazer. Like, he didn't do anything wrong. He's been out here dropping great dancehall sets for years. And all of a sudden, like, oh, by the way, your name now means Maximum Glazer.
Oh, God, that sucks. Well, there used to be like a really tiny, I've mentioned this before, a tiny artist named Dick Rider. and I got...
Wait.
I think that's what it was. I think it was a DJ.
Was it a joke, though?
I think it was like part of the Jackass era stuff. So it was like extreme comedy DJing off of Holotronics. I'm pretty sure this was when PR stuff would go out, and he had changed his name to like D Rider, Death Rider. And I'm like, it's like Giddy just being like, I don't want to be known as that. It's like, oh goddamn, now I'm known as that.
Now you're the slob king.
The slob master into something else. Slob
master.
It was something. I think it was slob master.
Yeah, Hollinger was glazing hard on that.
But it's like, every LeBron Jordan debate de-evolves into someone calling someone a bronsexual, which I think is like what I was just talking about with like
sorry, slob wizard.
He's like, I hope that doesn't stick. I'm like, dude, it's gonna be a weird month for you. But yeah, it's like this weird way of calling someone a casual or someone who doesn't, and it's not necessarily as dark as it sounds, because I think it is in the tradition of like an MTV rap battle or just a holdover from that culture.
Yeah, I think that's true. I'm still stuck on names that just end up.
Who else you
I
got?
was gonna say blowing up in your face, but that's poor terminology. I'm already into an underground rap DJ who went by DJ Hipsta.
Yeah, that's not good. Yeah.
A long time ago. This was before that became a pejorative phrase that was associated with like Williamsburg, and now it's used less, but we still hear it every now and then. But he was making music and trying to DJ parties, and like, who's gonna book DJ Hipster or Hipsta with an A at the end is how he spelled it, which is even more sort of noxious. In 2005.
Dude,
hi, I'm DJ Hipster. Yeah, let's put that on a flyer.
In that era, do you remember this popular band that would sell out rooms, that would like take it out on the streets and have like ruckus kind of performances in Williamsburg called the Black Lips? You remember that band from Atlanta?
Of course.
They probably are not going to have a reunion ever, right?
I feel like they did a show recently, but I could be wrong. Yeah, I know those guys. They had some good music.
I guess.
They performed at the more infamous Shank parties that occurred with Cerebral Ballsy, another good name.
There was Test Icicles, which was Dev's band, right? Was that Dev's band?
Mm-hmm, definitely. That was
They were kind of good.
Before or after his other one, which was like, what was it called? Like Lightspeed Champion, right?
I enjoyed that too. But Test Icicles still survives. I think that is good to go. That's a funny pun.
Yeah. Cerebral Ballsy honor is now like an artist.
Yeah, let's get it started in here. We'll stay that way. That is no longer a living document. A living
Let's get it
title.
R worded.
Let's get it R bombed in here. Yeah, I don't know, but the way things change kind of has its casualties, but the I find that every NBA debate kind of just ends there. When someone uses like this terminology, I'm just like, oh, we're done here. Like, we're not talking basketball anymore. We're talking like manliness, which is fine because I think that's the experience of getting into arguments at bars, at stadiums, at arenas, on the streets. I don't know. It's disappointing, but whatever.
Well, I like that point because this idea of like we're having a real conversation and someone's like, "Yeah, that's a good point you make, but you're glazing really hard. You're maximum glazing." You're like, "Well, where do we go from here? Do you want me to break out more stats, or are you just going to call me a glazer again?"
Right. It is like I do think everyone's gotten smarter with social media, Twitter as a whole. But I do think we've also gotten smarter just in the way we debate. So it's not bringing up new ideas or finding new combinations of ideas to counter another idea. It's how to win an argument. It's like Model UN, whatever that is. It's like you're not taught about like the ethics of world politics. You're taught how to win a debate.
This is vaguely related to this. Is illiteracy gone because of like phones?
Right.
I don't mean that everyone is a like great reader or writer, but generally speaking, I feel like everyone texts, everyone receives texts, everyone like looks at comments. Mm-hmm. I feel like I don't think reading comprehension is at an all-time high, but like, is everyone literate now because of cell phones?
There was a rumor when Trump first entered the political scene that he couldn't read, right? And they were like, oh, he goes off script because he can't really read well. So that's where he ad-libs and goes off onto his own thing. And that was like many years ago. That was like 8 or 9 years ago. There's a chance that he was illiterate and then became literate as he intensified his involvement. Now he has his own social media network that is words. And he may have learned how to read on the job. I'm just throwing this out there.
Well, the biggest thing about Trump is he learned to read during his second year in office.
I mean, everything checks out. Prove me wrong, Trump.
He's just there like, whoa.
But you remember that accusation, right? It's just like, oh, he goes crazy during these rallies because he can't read the prompter.
I always thought it was an eyesight thing, but I like literacy. That's funnier.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, not that he can't recognize simple words, but like string a bunch of them together in a rally, like that's the degree of difficulty.
But you know what I mean, though? Like, I don't know the numbers at all, but if you were like a farmhand back in the day,
right,
you didn't really have to read at all, or you weren't on a daily basis. I mean, you could, but you didn't have to. If you didn't have an educational background, you could work in a factory. You could do jobs. You could go through life. You go to the store. You ask for something. It's not like you're ordering products online. It's not like you're receiving text messages about anything. You could go through your life without really needing to read, or as you said, knowing like a couple words.
There's basketball
like
players who have
possible.
been accused of this. Yeah, there's NBA pros.
Of course, yeah.
Because they don't need to open books because they're so great at something else.
Right, there was always that. But just going back, I mean, you know, we're talking about a country with systematic oppression that didn't allow people to read. Like, literally did not allow it. It was, like, punishable. Sure. So, I mean, we're coming from this place. But I'm not speaking about any particular group. I'm just saying across the board, the necessity of being able to communicate via text seems to make it impossible to be fully illiterate in America in 2023.
Stop glazing literacy, man. I mean, that's a plausible theory, right? Like,
It's minimum glazing.
have you seen my band? It's called Minimum Glazer. I think we're gonna stand the test of time. It reminds me of when I was young. They used to teach us to type on computers. It's like, well, you have to do a X number of words a minute because in the future, the computer will be important to your value as a member of the workforce. So we need to teach a class how to type. I'm like, motherfucker, say Julius Randle's lazy and I'll learn how to type really fast. It's just like it just happens because there's like, ooh, someone said Kobe Bryant's as good as LeBron James 1,000 words later.
That's what I mean. Like it became something that wasn't a chore. It was something that you just have to do and need to do and want to do. And even us, we refuse to read books, and
No
yet
more books.
we are both quasi-literate.
We type words. Speaking of quasi-literacy, someone posted something on our Cookies Hoop blog.
That was a really good transition. So yeah, there's a new article up there. It's about, I don't know, maybe let's say it's 8-minute read. If you know how to estimate those things.
That's 8 minutes too long. How many glizzies can you eat in 8 minutes?
How many glizzies can you be glazed by in 8 minutes? So it's about the Brooklyn Nets, and of course they're the team that everyone is talking about. I can't stop talking Nets.
When the interns are like, "Yo, I got this Nets idea," I'm like, "Who?"
So, but this is kind of part of the discussion, right? In this article, and the reason I talked about the Nets was that they've been terrible. And they're, even because the fact that no one talks about them, that's gone under the radar too. They fucking suck. They've won 3 of 16 games. They are really bad. And those victories they had, 2 of them came against Detroit. So they've beaten one non-Detroit team in the last 16 games. And it was OKC. They're great. That's a nice victory. But the fact remains, one victory against a legitimate NBA team out of the last 16 games. And those Detroit games were not blowouts either. They are
Sleepy
bad.
Time Trio East.
And because they are not egregiously bad in the way that Detroit or Washington is, and because their record is still okay, like they're within like shouting distance of the 10th spot in the play-in, they've fallen under the radar. But think about this. This is the kind of premise here. Is like a year ago, this team had won 18 of 20 at one point while healthy. Well, under a year, had 2 of the greatest scorers of all time. The year before that, they had those guys and James Harden. And now they're here. This is what you wanted, right? You didn't want the distraction of superstars. You didn't want to be in the media. You didn't want Kyrie being controversial. You didn't want
mercenaries.
KD
You wanted homegrown talent. Yeah.
Well, here you are. You've beaten one legitimate NBA team in the last month. And no one's even talking about you.
And the attention that has gone away is like Boston writers no longer feel a threat coming from Barclays, right? And there's no reason to kind of hammer Mikal Bridges because they don't pose a threat to the Celtics. And they are truly bad and truly boring. Like, I like the Trailblazers now. They're really exciting. So the Sleepy Time Bear Award has to go to Brooklyn currently because they're kind of a negative hole in the NBA personality world because like none of these guys are interesting. They're kind of quiet, mechanical dudes, and Cam Thomas, who's the most interesting, is like not a good basketball player. You have a collection of like Bruce Browns.
So in this essay, we get into where do they go from here, and I think they have to their benefit is that they have the kind of players that are valuable for good teams.
Wait, can I interrupt you? Can I interrupt you?
Of course.
Because this article is really cool, but you kind of skipped over the cool thing. Like, you were talking about in the article, like, all these wonderful, all-time great players. but there was a sense of unhappiness. This is not ethical. I don't like the attitude of Kyrie Irving. I don't like how KD is a stoner who is always on the internet. And now they're gone. And now their presence is the story of what's happening in Barclays now, but we're not talking enough about it, right? Like,
Right. You mean the lack of presence.
Their lack of presence, or what they returned, is just like, we came to you for nothing, and now we're gonna leave, but leave a trail of like breadcrumbs for you, and like you have to gather all these breadcrumbs and like figure something out.
Right. Yeah. And people say, well, the Nets did a good job, getting draft picks back for Kevin Durant. They did a good job with that. I'm like, no, Kevin Durant did a good job.
Yes. Right.
Told you where he wanted to go.
Yeah.
And you were able to extract value for him because he had trusted your organization and signed a 5-year deal or whatever it was. Like, that's Kevin Durant's value. That's not you.
Yeah.
You didn't do a KG rebuild.
Yeah,
he asked to be
exactly.
traded.
Yeah.
You traded him where he wanted to go. And because he is so valuable and was under contract for a long period of time, you were able to get back some good players and some valuable draft picks. Yeah. That's KD gave that to you. He gifted that to you. Mm-hmm. If he hadn't signed that contract, he could have just left. If he hadn't decided to come to the Nets in the first place, you'd still be there fucking around with Joe Harris and Jared Allen.
Right. Respect to Joe Harris and Jared Allen. Yeah, same thing in Oklahoma City. It's just like, what a wonderful job they did drafting. I'm like, yo, they got really great players. Just choose that city. And when they left, they returned a lot in their absence. So we have to talk about that. It's the players, not Sam Presti. But yeah, what do the Nets?
The Brooklyn is very explicit in this, though, right? Mm-hmm. Because it was the entire return was Kyrie and KD, who basically came there unprompted. They just wanted to live in New York City. They didn't feel like playing for the Knicks. They wanted to be on the same team. And like, hey, Nets, we're coming in. And they're like, great. And then they both said, okay, you don't want us here. We want to be traded. And Nets said, okay, great.
Yeah.
And as you talked about a second ago, like this moral victory that the Nets had by, okay, we're taking this team back. No more inmates running the asylum. It's the Joe Tsai show. And you're like, dude, everything you have, this whole rebuild, is just based on those two guys deciding to come through. You have nothing else. That's it.
And what the fuck do they do now, though? This team is dull as hell.
I mean, look, we are the Ben Simmons apologist show. I just don't know if we'll ever see that guy healthy for any duration of time again. Yeah. I hope I'm wrong. He's fun to watch, and he would make this team a lot more interesting just in terms of stylistically, because all it is now is like one chucker in Cam Thomas and then a bunch of 3-and-D wings trying to play like 1Bs. It is a deeply unappealing brand of basketball. They don't have passers. Their defense isn't that good, even though it kind of should be, because it's compromised by guys like Cam Thomas.
Cam Johnson.
But I think the
Cam
solution
Thomas,
for them, for them seems to be like, you have to go star hunting again. The problem is you're just not going to get someone who is good as KD, Kyrie, or Harden. You can't get them. It's like, welcome to the reality of the rest of the NBA, you spoiled fuckers. You had these three guys. No, you had these three guys. Like, yeah, we're going to get rid of all of them. We're going to get rid of KD. We're going to get rid of Kyrie because you know what? We don't need superstars. We're going to be moral. We're going to be built a different way. Well, this is what life looks like when you don't have superstars on your team.
It's like addition by subtraction. Cam Johnson.
It's grim. It looks grim. And then you know what you're trying to do? Figuring out how to get a star.
Yeah, because I don't hate their pieces. I love Mikal Bridges. I thought that was a fine haul for a KD who was asking to be traded. I thought, Ben Simmons, on paper, fucking perfect fit. I like Nick Claxton, all these things. And sometimes stuff doesn't work out, and rebuilding is tough. It's not, sometimes it takes a long time. But the pieces here, I don't necessarily love the Dinwiddie presence. Cam Thomas doesn't play. We don't have to talk about Cam Thomas. Like, he's pretty much benched. But these pieces have proven to work around a superstar. But getting one of these stars, as we're seeing in this market now, like, who are the names popping up in the market? not superstars. Like, to be able to get KD and Kyrie is kind of a once in a decade thing.
It's insane. It's on par with what happened in Miami, and it's not on par with what happened in Los Angeles, either with Paul George or with Anthony Davis, because they had to give up valuable draft assets and players to acquire those guys.
Right.
In the case of the Nets and the Miami Heat, the players just landed in their lap. They don't have to do anything. They just
I know.
They are.
What's Heat culture? I'm like, great weather, taxes, lack of taxes.
You know, like Jimmy Butler going to Miami, that was amazing. They got him for, you know, they made the money work, but they didn't have to give up much. Maybe it was a pick and like, you know, Josh Richardson or whatever. But either way, he just decided to go. Then they got him. But in this case, you had two superstars just descending upon the Brooklyn franchise that had been in a thoughtful but kind of moribund rebuild.
Yeah.
And then you just say, okay, we don't need all that. I'm like, you were really spoiled. You didn't get that these guys are nearly impossible to acquire. I mean, look across the river.
Yeah.
As interesting and thoughtful and excellent as the Knicks have been, like they're a very good team. We all know what the issue is here. They don't have a superstar because there aren't that many of them.
Yeah.
And you had 2, 3 of these guys, and now you look at your team and you say, you know what's the void? We just don't have a superstar. Okay, how are you going to get one?
Right. Culture.
Who?
We do things the right way, so a superstar will be enticed to be like, Joe Tsai, hemorrhaging money from Alibaba, ruining that thing. He's like the moral guy here. And, you know, you mentioned the Knicks really quick, and you can't talk about the Nets without the Knicks. Leon Rose did not get Brunson, to your point about the Nets. Brunson was going to go to New York regardless of who was the GM. Steve Mills would have gotten Jalen Brunson. He was destined to go there. That was not a savvy play by the GM. That was just Brunson's choice, his family's choice. And, like, Joseph Tsai is frustrating on many levels, but the way he handled that entire thing with Kyrie and KD was funny because in real time as this was happening, we're like, but you're going to take great players off your team, win a moral victory, and just be bad for an indefinite period of time? Like, good luck with that, I guess?
I mean, and as just discussed in the article, he was just gaslit. He really believed that people cared about Kyrie. People cared about KD. People cared that the Nets as an organization were, you know, scandalous and out of control. He thought that those were genuine opinions that like the media was broadcasting. They weren't real.
They were not real.
It was Boston fans trying to blow up at their division rival, and it worked. That wasn't real. No one cared. Like, where's that praise now? Okay, I did it. No one's talking about me, about how virtuous this team is. Remember how I got rid of those bad men and built the right way? Like, I was like, what are you talking about, man? I don't remember that.
Yeah,
it was like a year ago. I'd won 18 of 20. We were going to win a title. I blew it up because you insisted that everyone cared so much. It was really offended by the existence of the Nets. Like, I don't remember that happening. It was, yeah, doesn't strike a bell, Joe.
We're realigning the league, and the Mavericks are now in the East. Boston. Is Kyrie Irving the worst dude in the NBA? Let's sift through all of his actions in the last 2 years. It's like, I mean, I like this idea of like what is real. Like, Twitter's not real life. That idea, it is and isn't, right? And I think we live a real life on social media where we get mad at Kevin Durant, and then we live a different life where we're like, basketball, is LeBron James still playing? You know, like, it's of course on the back page of the New York Post, but that is even a micro culture. And
yeah, and it's also, who are you doing this for? Are you doing it for the New York Post cover? Are you doing it for the basketball internet? Are you doing it for your fans? Like, who are you trying to win a title for? Who are you trying to build a team for the like fringe benefits of public relations? Like, what's your emphasis here?
Right. Yeah, what's your goal here to break up that team? And I don't know. I mean, it's hard to it's hard to talk about the Nets without talking about their competitors, and their competitors are the other teams that are really bad, right? If you were Detroit, or if you were the Hornets, or if you were the Spurs, who have the start of a great team, everyone's fighting for the same thing, aren't they? They're fighting for high draft picks or to entice a star.
Yeah, yeah, and also just the point you were making before. Like, if I was at the game when Kyrie came back and sat on the sideline during like the COVID suspension, he got a standing ovation.
Right.
Standing ovation. Whether or not you agree with him, he got a standing ovation. That's just what happened. I was there. It was electric. It was great. I was standing. Kyrie walked in. It was amazing. And he came and sat next to the court. Anyway, I was there. I was also the game I was at where he came back from his suspension for the Black Hebrew imbroglio. Mm-hmm. Standing ovation.
Yeah.
Literal standing ovation while there were Black Hebrews parading around the perimeter of Barclays Center.
Listen.
Standing
that was
ovation.
a college fraternity, according to Jaylen Brown, who was actually there.
They're just Lakers fans.
Yeah, that's right.
But no, standing ovation. So when you're Joe Tsai and you're saying, this guy's a distraction, I'm like, you're not paying attention to what's happening within your building. You're caring more what someone on ESPN is saying, more what someone who's putting up an article in the New York Post than about what's happening in your stadium with your fan base. People love KD and they love Kyrie and they love watching them play, and this team is good, and you threw that away. Do you think people are giving standing ovations for Cameron Johnson? No, they aren't. He's a good player. He's cool. But they were popular, they were good, they were interesting. He just couldn't handle the glare.
Yeah, and he fell for it. I mean, I get it. You know, like sometimes I get caught in this vortex of like daytime sports talk, WFAN. All this stuff is important, and it does exist. And like for a week, I was just thinking about is Jalen Brunson tall enough? And then when you go to the Garden, people are just clapping for him, just hoping for a win. 1 out of 10 people, I'm sure, would be like, he's too small to be a 1A. And people are like, what are you talking about, 1A? You know? And,
it's not even a phrase that we use.
Right. And it's sort of like
are you moderately glazing right now?
But it is true with politics. And, you know, I remember being so interested in DeSantis, you know, and his crazy fucking policies in Florida, and listening to him campaign and just kind of like being shocked at the things he was saying. And then you introduce him to a broader audience and everyone's like, oh, we don't care about this guy. We just don't like him. It's like, what about his ideas? Like, what about his ideas? We just don't like the way he looks. And we saw in Iowa yesterday, like, he's not real. Ron DeSantis is not real.
Yeah, one of my friends who's, we don't need to talk too much about it, but I'm just going to confirm exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
One of my friends is like, no. Ron DeSantis is not a candidate. Once people see how he talks and what he looks like, he is completely impossible to vote for.
Yes.
No.
Right.
People know about him because they see his press. They think he's some like tough guy, conservative rabble rouser from Florida. Once you see him and you hear him, you can't vote for him.
Yeah, and I understand why this happens in basketball, obviously, and in politics. These for-profit companies like ESPN or CNN or Fox are just like, yo, our ratings go through the roof when we talk about Ron DeSantis. So keep on talking about him. It's like, well, is he going to impact the race? Is Trump going to be the guy? It's like, yeah, DeSantis doesn't matter. But like, we're doing good numbers when we talk about Kyrie Irving being unethical. Like, that's where we get ratings because people care about it. Our audience cares about it. But really, it doesn't exist in another kind of real life. And
I mean, we talked about this at the time.
Yeah.
Exactly this, what you're saying.
Right.
That the media is talking about it. Twitter is talking about it. No one in real life is talking about this.
Right. And some of the people on Twitter don't really care about it either. So it's even a small subsect there being like, what are you talking about? Like the clear-headed people I enjoy following are just like, oh, this is a really complicated discussion about like a way to interpret the Bible. And we're not talking about that anymore, so whatever. you know, and I follow them and away from the other conversation. But the willingness to search for a villain, I think, is the theme here. And the Nets don't have anything. They don't have a hero or a villain. They have a bunch of like Commissioner Gordons.
So, talking about this idea, these moral conflagrations. So I'd say conflagration. Anyway, these moral dust-ups. We just got a good one with the Thelma Krause, the widow of a former Chicago Bulls general manager Jerry Krause, during a, what was it called, the Circle of Honor or something along those lines.
Ring of Honor, maybe.
Ring of Honor. She came out at the Chicago Bulls Stadium and she was booed by Bulls fans. And some of the headlines are classless, shameful. Bulls fans ripped for booing. Worst thing I've ever seen, says someone. Another one, NBC, Bulls fans classlessly booed.
I mean, even on the broadcast, while it was happening, they were like, I believe it was Stacey King being like, this is unbelievable, disrespectful. I mean,
you got an alternative take on this, my dog?
I love it. Boo all the hell you want. I mean, I may sound heartless here, but I'm not riding for like a rich old white lady. Boo the hell. I respect my elders. I respect the dead, but not as much as the living. So like, if someone wants to boo your damn head off, man.
So my thing is this. I don't like when players get booed particularly. I think that's generally
This is where I'm
lame.
coming from. Yes.
At home, I don't like that. On the road, feel free. Boo your opponent. That's fine. Like,
Even that, you don't want to sit next to someone booing, right? It's like,
no, it's annoying, but I'm saying I don't mind that. But at home, I don't like that. Like I don't. If your team is getting rocked at the half, and you think they're playing lazy or whatever, you can boo the team collectively. Like boo all you guys. You're playing bad. That's fine. Whatever. I don't like when like they're booing Al Horford in Philadelphia. I'm like, what are we doing? Like Al Horford, he's 0 for 6, so we're booing him. Like, relax.
That's
Al
lame. Horford. Like, how about an All NBA player at MSG and Julius Randle? Like, what the fuck?
I'm just giving examples. Yeah, it's lame. Stop. Like, look, this is minimum glazing. Stop it.
Yeah,
But-
I mean,
But you can boo the team. You can collectively. That's fine.
Yeah, and we got into these debates about people spitting on players and acting crazy in the stands, touching players.
Yeah, I think all that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. And like the people who I disagree with are like, but they bought tickets and this is part of the experience. I'm like, you're not wrong. Booing is a part of it. Thinking bad thoughts about your enemy. This is semiotics. This is wrestling. There has to be a villain here. I get this experience, but
You're not suggesting that they should be ejaculated for booing.
I see through this performative ejaculation. This is just for show. This is glazing, show glazing. But it is. So my take on this lovely woman, I have known nothing about her. I thought her husband did an amazing job with the Chicago Bulls. I mean, is 6 championships good? I don't know. And he's always been hated. He was booed when he would accept the trophy in the ceremonies when he was working there. So someone in the Bulls front office is trolling because he's going to get booed. Why did you put that nice old lady up there to get savaged by the crowd? And of course, it's like Jerry Krause's wife. And it said Thelma Krause, but he was announced. So the boos rained down. I'm like, this is a bad job in whoever set this thing up. But
So
yeah, go ahead.
my take on here is, it was totally a setup in that way, but also, well, what do you expect? No one in the stands cares about Thelma Krause. Like she is an empty conduit for what you think about Jerry Krause.
She didn't touch glass. She didn't slap wood. Ugh,
She
terrible.
didn't. Yeah, like whether or not you think Jerry Krause was good or bad at his job, and we can debate that. But whatever your opinion on him is just going to be your opinion on her. And
Right.
we can say like, well, she didn't do anything. She's innocent. But yeah, she didn't do anything. She didn't do anything good either. She is just an empty vessel for your feelings about Jerry Krause in the moment. And
yeah.
she shouldn't feel sad. And it's not classless unless you think that booing Jerry Krause is classless, because she's an empty vessel.
Yeah. And it bears mentioning here, Jerry Krause got a lot of ire because it was management versus the players a little bit. And I believe Bulls fans felt his friction with Michael Jordan, Phil Jackson, contract stuff, flipping the team over to a new supporting cast was like a bit heartless, and they would have had more championships if they had just stuck with it. But Jerry Krause kind of adapted and added these wonderful second act players like Tony Kukoc and Dennis Rodman. And I thought the booing of him was a signal to people of themselves being like, I'm blue collar, your management, we had a great thing, you ruined it.
I agree with that. I also think that The Last Dance did not do any favors for Jerry Krause's legacy, and in terms of the perspective of Michael Jordan, as you said, players versus management, them blowing up the team, not wanting to bring back Phil Jackson, not wanting to pay these players. Look, we know too much about how front offices work now.
Exactly.
This is ownership.
Yeah.
Jerry Krause may have had his opinions, but ultimately, when it comes to shelling out money and things of that nature, that comes down to ownership.
Yeah.
If Chicago Bulls ownership wanted to go a certain way, they would have gone that way.
Yeah.
Jerry Krause didn't run the show. He's a worker too.
Yeah, exactly. He is a boss. And I got into a little, online I was like, boo all you want. If we went through this whole debate every time a player gets booed and you're allowed to boo Ben Simmons and kind of slander him endlessly on social media, yeah, take an old white lady, yeah, she can take strays too, whatever. And the pushback was like, well, don't you respect the dead? And it got me to thinking about I do not. I respect the fucking living. That is my problem with all this. The rest in peace to the dead, but they are no longer in this thing that I can experience, which is just life. And to punish someone with booze who's living is different than punishing someone with booze who's dead. I don't care about the dead. They're gone. We have to focus. And she's alive, obviously. So I'm like, well, she's in the crossfire, but this idea that as soon as someone's dead, we should cherish their name has always been weird to me. I'm like, it's
but also, also it's they weren't booing her. They were booing Jerry Krause. It's look, okay, Judy Dahmer is here.
Whoa. You took that into a zone. All right, respect. You glazing those serial killers, man.
Please welcome Cheryl Bundy.
Cheryl. All the Cheryls in the world are like, what the fuck? Who are tuned in right now to Cookies Hoops.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise. Make some noise for Pamela Gacy.
The Summer of Samantha, everybody.
Sharon Hitler now joins us.
Oh, no. Oh, my God. Sharon Hitler, like we don't know who he's hooking up with.
Ginny Lee Pinochet.
Amanda Bin Laden, everybody. Samantha Hussein.
Karen Bin Laden.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Yay, respect the dead. But I felt bad for Thelma, man. I am not heartless. That was awful, but someone messed up, and the people who pretended to clutch their pearls, I'm like, dudes, you were just slandering anybody you could a moment ago. So either we're doing this or not, or the fun part is the gray area, because if being a fan of this thing entitles us to villains, then Thelma's a villain. I don't know. But if we have that Gen X tranquility, I'm we don't really boo, which gets, I have this debate with one of my friends all the time. He's like, don't be that Zoomer who just thinks it's not okay to boo. We're here to boo. You're just taking this thought too far. And I'm like, I don't know. What if I just don't do it? Like, I just don't think it's a part of what I care about.
I personally just don't believe in booing your own players. That's just my worldview. I think the 99.9% of these players, whatever sport, are trying really hard and doing the best that they can. And if they're having an off day, booing them doesn't help anything. Like, they know they're playing bad. They are very cognizant of the fact that they are 1 of 9 in the first quarter, and you raining down boos on them doesn't make them become better.
Or
Like,
what if
they know, they get it.
Right. But what if it's politics, right? Like, this first occurred to me when Walter McCarty was a Celtic. I was like, I like Walter so much. What do I do here? One of my favorite Knicks of all time, Kristaps Porzingis, is now playing so good in Boston. I'm like, damn it, I'm kind of rooting for him. Like, even though my assigned villain is Boston because I'm from New York, whatever. Like, what do we do there?
I think booing for KP when he comes to New York as a Celtic, I think he probably likes that. I think that's like
awesome.
a sign of respect.
I agree with that, for sure. I don't want to do it, though, because I really like him. It doesn't feel good.
I don't mean you have to. I feel like there is something there, like, hey, you used to be here, now you're not. That's like a very acceptable booing. But I think it's acceptable to boo fans of the other team in your building. Why not? You're trying to make an impact in some way with a game. Right. I don't think it really matters at all, but it feels as if you're getting active.
Yeah. I'm not friends with many people who boo. That is not the personality type like I'm drawn to go to a game. Like, if I go to the game with you and you're like, boo, Kyrie, you fucking suck. I'm like, this is probably the last time we're doing this, man. This kind of blows.
The last thing I wanted to think about Krause was kind of interesting because we've mentioned this on the show before, but I remember talking with a guy who worked on the analytics side of like an Eastern Conference team a while back. He's not there anymore. But he was kind of talking about this dynamic that exists between people who are in the club and out of the club within the NBA. And you've got the lifers and former players and people who have, come up and they've been part of this idea of like this jock culture. They really embrace it. And then you've got the guys on the other side that might be, eventually they can get to be part of that, but they aren't originally from it in the way that like Presti and Morey and Hinkie and the sort of like more metrics-based guys who may have come out of data research or et cetera. And there is still this schism in the league between like these guys are in the club and these guys aren't. And I remember they were telling me like David Griffin, like he's a metrics guy. He's not really in the club. People don't really like him like that. And you do see more criticism for those kind of GMs. We saw with Hinkie or Morey. There's more sort of suspicion towards them versus like the old guard, the guys who are lifers. I mean, the Knicks are an organization that really loves those lifers. Whether it's like Steve Mills or these guys who have just
Nepo babies like CAA.
You've worked in the basketball industry. Right. You played in college. You came out. You worked for the NBA for 15 years. You worked for the Knicks for years. You worked for Magic Johnson. I'm talking about Steve Mills. Like you're a lifer. You're a basketball guy. Mm-hmm. And I think with Krause, like I can't speak to his history because I don't know it that well. But the fact that he was like an overweight, unattractive Jewish guy who probably didn't play a ball at a high level.
Right.
I think there was something to that disdain for him, whether it came from MJ, whether it came from other people. It was like, who are you to tell us what we should be doing as a team? Who are you to make these decisions? And I think a lot of it is that he was an outsider and he was unattractive and he was just not the kind of person that Michael Jordan or perhaps other members of the Bulls respected.
Yeah, I mean, I love to talk about movie casting when people think about the NBA because so much of it is about visuals, right? It's like Phil Jackson checks out, ex-player, looks like a coach. Michael Jordan checks out, A1. Scottie Pippen, a less handsome version of Michael Jordan. Can you imagine if Scottie Pippen was more handsome than Michael Jordan? He'd be talked about differently, right? Be like, well, what a duo that team is, instead of just being like, Pippen's nothing without Jordan. But yeah, Jerry Krause like symbolizes like the punny pitching money man. He looks like the owner that everyone kind of villainizes instead of the mastermind of these teams, truly. And that the famous images of him in the lottery drawing where he's like pumping his fists. I'm like, that's not what people want to see, but super interesting. And I don't know, we just fall in line with these casting rules, talking about like semiotics, the S-bomb. It's just like the perceptions of what these people are based off of how they look is something they have to overcome, not necessarily fall into.
Yeah, and again, I don't think it's solely based on like his religion, but certainly stereotypes of like, oh, he's cheap and he's like this
Real
like,
talk, yep.
overweight Jewish guy. Like these things are not unique to this
No.
scenario, and I'm pretty sure they were part of it.
1,000%. And especially along the business side of, right, you said what we know now, how teams work. The GM is like very involved in the day-to-day, but for a while I thought they were perceived as upper ownership, kind of gravitationally. But no, they have the ears of the coach, they have the ears of the players. I don't know, Jerry Krause, his 6 championships is bad. Like, come on, man.
I mean, look, did he blow up the Bulls before he had to? Maybe so. I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
And, you know, but we also only heard one side of that story.
Right.
We heard the side that was Jerry Krause blew it up. And you look back in your time, like, yeah, it was strange that a team would win 3 championships in a row and then call it a day. That is extremely fucking weird to do as a basketball organization. This ties back to the perfect conversation we had about Golden State like last week, where they just kept plugging away at it. They didn't blow it up. Yep. They doubled down. They ended up getting a chip. Now they're crumbling again. But they kind of did this in the way that all teams are supposed to go through it. You keep fighting to try to get another ring, and maybe you eke one out, and then you face the inevitable decline of your team. And you know, that's just how this ascension and fall of basketball empires works. And part of the Jordan lore is that they didn't do that. In some ways, if it was Krause that said, we're going to blow this whole thing up, and Jordan said, okay, well, then I'm going to retire. I don't like basketball enough. I'm out of here. He really did a incredible service to Jordan's legacy, because if Krause compelled Jordan to retire, which was kind of what was alluded to in the Last Dance, then he preserved that
exactly
6 championships. We never had to see the Bulls lose and Jordan go out on a shield, because if this is how we're going to interpret it, Krause said, yeah, we're done here.
Yeah, I mean, the LeBron versus Jordan debate has, as LeBron racks up all these numbers, has segued into like, well, Jordan was more economical in his career. LeBron is playing too long. He's been good for too long, so that kind of dilutes his impact, which is hilarious. But like, you know, the Thelma thing kind of brought back the Jordan debate again. And I was trying to think of, as the NFL is kicking into like its really fun part of the season, the playoffs, baseball, just thinking about other sports. We don't talk about like Joe Montana, Peyton Manning, or like Ken Griffey Jr. the same way we talk about Michael Jordan. And like, what if there was Mike Trout, Shohei Ohtani? Be like, yo, these guys are crazy good. It's like, well, he's no Ken Griffey Jr., that's for sure. It's like, why are we always talking about Ken Griffey Jr.? It's like, yo, these quarterbacks are insane. Like, Lamar Jackson is awesome. It's just like, oh, Joe Montana, though. Joe Montana crushes him. Here's the championships. And we do this in basketball, I wonder. First, I thought, is basketball kind of a complex game where you don't have a quarterback or a pitcher or a hitter? No one stands by themselves and succeeds. It's like a very complicated team game with many moving parts. When people started posting Jordan highlights again after this Thelma incident, like his career-defining moments against the Jazz or Craig Elo, I'm like, there's a lot of things happening on that court, and the shot goes in, but like, it's not an extraordinarily athletic endeavor. Like, he has done nothing extraordinary other than the pressure of the situation. But it's hard to talk about how they got there and why he was in that situation and how good Scottie Pippen was. And I think through the difficulty of the nuances of basketball, people just reside to, like, my favorite sneakers have his logo on it. Michael Jordan's a GOAT. End of story. Because it's an easy way to put it into a box.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I hadn't really considered that when you look at, say, Jordan's shot against Brian Russell, or his shot against Craig Elo, they're just kind of like standard mid-range jumpers. It's the context that matters, and they are symbolic of his greatness. Mm-hmm. They're symbolic of winning championships and him being the guy who gets the ball, the A1 in those positions. Okay, Jordan, the title all hinges on you and your greatness, and that's true. It's valid. But I know what you mean, though. Just taken in isolation, if you don't know what's the context and you don't see how the reaction is, which shows that this is not just a normal basket, they are not within like the top 5,000 Michael Jordan highlights.
No, exactly.
And it's weird when you think about that. That is, I mean, he is one of the most incredible, exciting highlight machines who has ever lived. He has outrageous highlights, but we think of him as a mid-range shooter. When they say the first shot that pops into your head, the first Michael Jordan play, in my mind, it's Elo or Brian Russell.
Yeah,
it's not like him doing an insane dunk over somebody, or it's the other one that's from the finals of the Lakers, which again is kind of symbolic of him winning that series. The one where he changes hands and does the little like looping lefty shot, which again was kind of pointless. But those are the three that kind of always go into your head
every game. Yeah.
Because they're emblematic of winning championships, not because they're actually like his greatest plays.
Yeah, and everyone sometimes I hear, maybe I think about the origin story of these moves, like him dunking from the foul line. Many players can do that now, as we've seen, but he was the first. But I think of the most beautiful basketball things, and I'm like, what about Dr. J's like layup from behind the basket? Like, that is better than any Jordan highlight. But he's big, and he's not cast as the main character because he's the freakish guy who's too tall, and the idea of casuals is interesting to me because not only do people reside in glazing or bronze sexualism, people are like, you're just a casual, do you even watch the games? And I'm like, okay, fair. That's an interesting way to say it. Like, I know more than you because I am a student of the game and you are clearly not, because your opinion is not my opinion. And then I'm like, maybe basketball is a really difficult game to watch, and I feel like I know so little about it. As clear, these are perfect pods, but like my personal bar is my personal bar. But it's wild to get older watching the game through generations of great players and still reside in the place of like Michael Jordan's a GOAT. And I see where that could happen because I know people aren't watching 4 games on 4 screens in their house at 10 o'clock every night, but like the joy of the experience of being an NBA fan is thinking that there is a God, and that is Michael Jordan, and that God is like, make the court bigger, but no, on his deathbed. But like, you know where I'm going with this, right? Like, it is a great place to be as a fan. It is fun.
Well, I have no problem whatsoever with people saying MJ's the GOAT. That's, to me, a valid, acceptable NBA position. And I think there is maybe 3 acceptable ones. It's that, it's LeBron, and if someone said like Wilt. I don't even believe Wilt, but I'm just saying those to me are like the 3 acceptable. This is the greatest player of all time.
Yeah, I'm with
you. You might be able to squeeze Kareem in there, but I just mean those are all acceptable. Yeah. If someone says that's how I feel, I'm like, hey, live your truth. Cool.
Yep.
Go on, great. It's just not worth having this argument.
Right,
that's who you believe. Look, some of us have Allah, some of us have Jesus, whatever. We got to expand the temple.
Some of us have God, Sham God.
You got God, Sham God. We gotta expand the basement of of scars. Come on, let's do this. But I wanted to get back to what you were talking about, sort of the idea of fandom. And I was having this discussion with my buddy Jacob Forsch the other night, and he was like, "Well, no one watches all the games. There's too many. You can't do it."
A lot, yeah.
I mean, maybe someone like Nikias Duncan does.
Yep.
But
Or
overall,
Zach Lowe or something. Yeah.
yeah, like people who like this is their sole job, and they watch all the film, they're breaking it down, and sure.
Yeah.
But overall, you can't do it. There's too much basketball. Like there's not enough hours in the day to actually study everything and see everything. So what you're really talking about when this whole conversation of casuals comes up is about one team.
Right.
And that's where this sort of break between like the national media who talks about all basketball and like the fans of one team. Because if you're fans of one team, that's all you really care about, then that's when you pull the "do you watch the games, bro?" Like, well, look, I've watched every Knicks game. Have you watched every Knicks game? To someone who is not a diehard Knicks fan, like, well, of course I haven't.
Right.
Because there's so much basketball. I watch some Knicks. I watch some Lakers. I watch some Clippers. I watch the best game that's on. I don't watch a game that's a blowout. Oh, the Knicks are up by 30 on some team. Of course I'm not watching that. Why would I?
Right.
There's something else on. But that's like the trump card that the diehard fan of one team can always pull. Yeah, but do you even watch the games? Because when they're up 30 or down 30 in the fourth quarter, I'm in there watching their scrubs come off the bench. And let me tell you, so-and-so has no left hand.
And this is like the burden of proof thing that Model UNers learn at an early age. It's like, accuse your opponent of not being knowledgeable and then ask them details that they could get wrong. Like, never introduce your own idea if you don't have to. Just accuse them of not being authentic and then have them prove it. And then you're going to win the argument. And I just think it's not a genuine, there's a disingenuous tone to all of it when you see people debating, yo, this weird Kobe Bryant versus LeBron thing is like, it's very strange to me because obviously Kobe Bryant is not as good as LeBron James. But if Kobe Bryant fans are loud enough and respect the dead, we're going back to the Krause thing, then it's like hard to argue against. It's like, you're going to disparage a dead man? And I'm like, yeah, he couldn't really shoot as well as some other players. It's like, how dare you? I was like, I don't know, I dare, whatever. But it is something that, as I'm watching football yesterday, no sin bin, I noticed, because there's no like mention of Michael Jordan when people are talking about like Patrick Mahomes. It's like, yo, Patrick Mahomes like dismantled a formidable team in quick fashion this week in the playoffs, but no one's just like, but he's no. It's like, you're just glazing for Mahomes. Like, he's no Montana. It's like, there's none of that, because it's a complex game that has been like packaged well with the people who talk about it.
That's true. I mean, like, are we supposed to give Chub Rock his flowers now?
Is he alive? Okay, we gotta Google it. Is he alive or not?
No, he's alive. He's alive.
Okay. Oh, that's
like, do you want to give him his flowers now or disrespect him when he's dead? The choice is yours.
Glaze, Chub Rock Glazer.
That works.
Checks out.
Chub Rock Glazer, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, what is your rap
Definitely.
name based off of? It's like, an erection. It's just like the thing that Draymond Green does.
Yeah, he was ejaculated for like, what, 13 games?
Yeah. Oh my God! If he keeps on arguing, he's gonna get erected from this game.
We don't need to talk about the Golden State fiasco right now. Despite
There's
all
more
the
fiascos to
ejaculations
come.
to
Yeah.
the contrary. But with the Nets idea of like how do you build and Krause and the GMing, we're at like the NBA's version of hot stove right now, right?
Yeah.
Where we know that there's going to be moves made by February. So
Yeah.
the Knicks kicked it off by acquiring OG, and I think them doing that move early, prematurely, ejaculating him from Toronto to New York, kind of made sense because they got one of the more desirable Chub Rocks off the market. Now you've got Lauri Markkanen, Zach LaVine, Pascal Siakam, and DeJounte Murray. They are pretty much the big four. That doesn't mean that someone else couldn't jump into the mix, but those are the guys that we keep hearing the most about. I don't know where to really start with this. I mean, I guess we can look at Utah, who's playing really well. I can't remember if they've won 9 of 11 or something along those lines, and they're really balling out.
Yeah.
And they're contending for a play-in spot at this point. Is Lauri Markkanen on the move or no? Like, is this are they serious? You know, because right now they're in the 9th spot. Yeah. They are 1 game back of Phoenix for the 8th. So like, and they are going to have to fend off teams who are pretty good, like the Lakers, Houston, you know, Golden State. Like 2 of those teams are not going to make the playoffs, and those are going to be solid teams.
Yeah.
So like, is Utah gonna? Are they buyers or sellers? I guess that's what I'm trying to get around to.
And I think the first thing I think about is, does Danny Ainge want to win games or not? Because last year we were like, well, he's a killer in the market, and he is willing to flip players for assets all the time. And last year he didn't. He stuck with his team, and he won. He wanted to win, and it was contrary to what we assumed he would do. I don't think he meant to do that. I think the market didn't present what he wanted in return. So I think he is a seller, but if he can't get what he wants, notoriously high asking price, then he will look like he's not, but he is until the right number comes back of assets. And Lauri Markkanen has been rumored to be available for a long time, and he's a good player, and the Jazz are climbing up the standings. I think he's showcasing these players. I think he is desperately trying to find a 1A, whatever you want to call it. And Lauri's not that. But if he can't find the bevy of picks he's looking for, he won't do it.
I think that's true. You know, when you're using the strategy that he seems to be, which is, okay, we're going to trade off our 2 main stars and Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, and we're going to get other teams' picks. We don't have to be concerned with being that bad ourselves.
Yeah.
Let's just take an organic approach. If we're playing well and winning games, that's cool. No one's going to be mad at us. Fans will enjoy it. And if an offer comes that will knock your socks off,
yeah,
then you take it. And I think that's a cool, almost like mature way of rebuilding in some ways. But it also is because they were able to trade off and take apart a team that was quite good. You know, if you're starting from scratch, you don't have a Donovan Mitchell and a Gobert to trade away. Mm-hmm. And this was the same thing that Ainge did in Boston. Like, sure, you can do a good rebuild when you trade away the components of a title-winning team in Paul Pierce and KG, if you just take this totally heartless approach. And like, that's valid and it's smart, but also that's what Golden State never wanted to do, and that's what Golden State could have done. They could have said at one point, all right, I think we're done. Right. Let's trade everyone away. And this gets back to the Krause conversation.
Yep.
Because Krause, what he did to kind of blow up the team and start over, it's not any different from what Ainge did in Boston. It's not any different from what he did in Utah right now. It's not any different from what like Sam Presti has done.
Yeah.
But because it involves Michael Jordan and the Bulls and championships, then there is a different connotation to the whole sort of idea of blowing it all up. And again, I think that was a strange decision. But this is what Ainge kind of does. He goes to teams that have won with Boston and takes it apart and uses that to get assets for a rebuild. Or he goes to a team in Utah that was one of the better teams in the league a few years ago and says, oh, I've got 2 all-star players that I'm going to get picks back for. Yeah. So, yeah, I am with you. I think if someone says, hey, we'll give you 4 first-rounders and 2 swaps for Markkanen, of course he'll do it.
Yes. It's like there's a rumor that Julius Randle is on the trade market. Like everybody is for the right price. And the guy is Danny Ainge. He's the guy who traded away Rajon Rondo and Paul Pierce. That they were supposed to get their flowers. They won a championship. Instead of trying to get another one, he was like, okay, I'm going to cash out to some success, I think. And you made a good point. Like, he inherited a team with no Klay Thompson, no Draymond Green, players that fans identify with, like a generation of success and love, you know. And there's
also these guys were younger.
Yep.
Clay and Draymond, even if you wanted to trade them off, they were making insane amounts of money.
Yep.
And they're old, and they're part of, as you said, this legacial dynasty.
And Ainge is in a cool position where he has an asset that came from Chicago, and I believe Chicago through Cleveland, perhaps. God, I don't know Lauri Markkanen's resume as well as I should, but he is somebody that I don't think Jazz fans identify with necessarily, and he's being pumped up in my feeds as somebody who could make a very good team, a championship team. He's had a very good season. He's young. He's 26. And he's going to get paid soon. I would be wary of giving up too much for him. I'm trying to explain my doubts to myself about him. He's a 7-footer, but he doesn't really play around the rim or is not necessarily a great closeout defender. He's a really good scorer, efficient scorer, and he can get buckets. But I have yet to look at his assisted versus unassisted points. But he strikes me as someone who could be considered a system guy.
I think with Markin, my hesitancy on him is that I think he's an excellent shooter. He's an efficient scorer. He can score quite a bit. Is that what is his role on a new team, right? And
Exactly.
just to use like the Sixers as an example, right? Okay, so they bundle Tobias Harris and a bunch of assets up and get Markkanen. Whatever. The details are unimportant, but they get Markkanen. Okay. So when he's playing with Embiid and he's playing with Maxey, what's his job? He's no longer your first scorer or your second scorer. Now he's probably your third. He stands in the corner a lot. He takes threes. So which means that it's more important that his defense is good. It's more important that he brings other things besides scoring to the table because he's just not going to be asked to do it at the same volume that he was before. Like the role of primary scorer is no longer his. And now we need more defensively from him. We need more from him as a passer, and again, maybe he can do these things, but I always feel like the Kevin Love archetype, I think, is a little bit, how would I describe it? Kevin Love in Cleveland can never be Kevin Love in Minnesota.
Right. Yes.
It doesn't work the same. And so someone like OG is kind of interesting because it's like, hey, we don't really care whether you score or not. You're going to take some open threes, and we've seen you do that. You're going to move the ball. You're going to play defense. Those things can remain intact, and that's what we're trying to extract value from you. But when you get someone like Markin, it's like, okay, well, you're just not going to have the same role as a scorer. So then what are you?
Right.
Like, what is Lauri Markkanen scoring 17 a game? What is he then?
Who isn't
Is
much
that
of
someone
a-
that you
right.
is that someone you'll give up 4 first rounders and 2 swaps and a young guy for? I don't know.
Playing in the margins is valuable for someone like Markkanen, and he doesn't quite do that. But yeah, he's an example of the fit being really important. Same with Zach LaVine. Siakam can do a bit more, and DeJounte is also in the Lauri category. I think having a defined role for these players is paramount to their value, and a team like Philly, I don't know, the fit isn't quite perfect. It never hurts to add a good player. I like him over Tobias Harris, but
Sure. I
Caruso's
would
the
listen
one.
to an argument.
Yeah.
I would listen to an argument that someone said, no, I think if you had him there spacing the floor with Embiid and Maxey, it gives them the kind of juice on the perimeter without sacrificing the defense. And then when you have Embiid's off the court, you can either put him at the 5 or you put him next to Paul Reed, who's a good defender, and in the same way that Embiid is, and that'll cover up his deficiencies on that side of the ball. I'm willing to hear it.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. Is that worth the salary he's going to command? Is it worth giving up a ton of assets? Maybe not. But to your point, it's never bad to add a good player, especially one that, you know, can space the floor like he can, and is like he's big, but yeah, I'm not sure if he's the right guy, but maybe I could be convinced if you like really got under the hood. I'm like, all right, here's why I think he would make so much sense. I'm like, okay, I hear that.
You know what also makes so much sense? This perfect pod.
This pod is very sensible and perfect. Cookies.
I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.